Hello and welcome to our second story time. Happy New Year's. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe it's 2025. Are we ready for this? Well, this story feels very appropriate if I can get it published because of the theme. It might not, but let's just dive in. So this is a story that I started to write back in May of 2024 as an erotica short that came to me. I loved the idea of Mary Magdalene and Jesus getting it on. And so I thought, because I wanted to write fiction, that maybe writing an erotica short would be an easy way to train myself on how to write captivating, engaging, quick moving, yet maybe somewhat deep prose, because my erotica, if you've read any of my poetic prose over on Substack, is definitely more esoteric and spiritual. Then about midway through June, I believe, is when I decided that, oh no, this is a much deeper story that just continued to evolve throughout the summer. And by the end of summer, I was looking at this as if it was probably going to be a 2 to 3 book series, and that's where it's landing right now. Researching for this book, it is a historical fiction if you haven't heard me talk about it yet, and it is set in the biblical days with Mary Magdalene and Jesus, and researching for this book has been such a delight to me. So let's jump in without further ado. This is straight from the Substack piece. So this is not part of the story yet, but I definitely wanted to read this. What if the stories we've been told about women, men, and the Bible and God itself were never the full truth? What if the voices of the divine feminine, the goddess, and the women who lived outside the confines of patriarchal constructs, even while in it, were silenced, their myths buried beneath layers of dogma and institutional power? The Sacred Tryst, which began in May of 2024, was an erotica short before turning into a full-blown historical fiction series. It dares to uncover what lies in the recesses of our collective mind, beneath all the layers of dust and male dominance. Through the intertwined journeys of Mary Magdalene, Yeshua, that's his Hebrew name, of Jesus, from 2,000 years ago to present, this book unearths ancient truths and forgotten wisdom, offering us all a chance to reimagine history, the identity of the Christ, the feminine and the masculine, indeed, to reweave the fabric of our world built through a truly feminine perspective. In this excerpt, we will meet Mary and Yeshua as she challenges him to grapple with his deeply ingrained beliefs about God, known as Yahweh, and the world, that answer long ago asked questions on how he appears as an egalitarian to us today. Mary embodies the untamed and unapologetic voice of the feminine we wish was present throughout all of time, challenging the patriarchal structures that have defined the world for 4,000 years at that time that she was around. Her defiance, authority, and truths strike at the heart of his and our teachings, forcing him and us to confront our own internalized misogyny and prejudices. This series is not merely a retelling of familiar biblical narratives. It is a resurrection of the feminine myths that patriarchal systems sought to bury for good. Through Yeshua's 2,000-year odyssey, hint, and the transformative arcs of other characters, the Sacred Tryst eliminates the struggle to unlearn the programming of patriarchy. It invites readers to reimagine a world where spirituality isn't confined to rigid hierarchies, but instead is a living, breathing dance between the sacred and the profane, the feminine and the masculine. As Yeshua's journey unfolds, we see the human longing to reconcile with the sacred feminine, to recognize the balance that patriarchy has admonished from our lives. Mary's voice, the voice of the forgotten women and goddesses, is a call to remembrance, not just for Yeshua, but for all of us. It challenges us to see beyond our conditioned understanding of history and spirituality, and thus challenge us how we act today based on these stories. It challenges us to dream of a whole new world, one where we clearly see the imprint of the feminine as divine, sacred, and wholeheartedly needed for all of time. Are you ready to step into a possible version of history to uncover the truths that could change everything? Let's dive into the Sacred Tryst and join this journey of unraveling, remembrance, and recreation. If you want to grab a drink or a blanket and curl up next to the fire, or your own fire perchance at home. Yeshua is 26 and Yeshua is 29 in the year 26 AD, which is pretty historically accurate. And he's traveling along the road from Jerusalem, which is the highest point in Israel, down to Jericho, which is at the north end of the Dead Sea, essentially. And it's on a road called Wadi Gelt. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. The prefect of Judea at this time, the person ruling Judea, which is where Israel is, where Jerusalem is. Judea and Israel were actually two different nations at that point in time. Judea was the southern portion of what we know of Israel today and Palestine. And Israel was the northern portion where Nazareth and Magdala is part of. The month is the Jewish month of Nisan, which would have been March/April of our calendar. Earlier in this chapter, so setting the stage, this is not the full chapter, we are traveling along with Yeshua, Jesus' given Hebrew name, as he returns to his community, his brotherhood, the Yakad at Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls would be found almost 2,000 years later. He is lost in thought, enjoying the cool early morning majesty of the mountains, when he suddenly finds himself knocked out flat on his stomach, unable to breathe. We are picking up where he begins to regain consciousness and hearing a woman. "Give me all your coins, and my friends and I will let you go in peace," comes her sing-song voice over my coughs, sounding impatient. She speaks in Aramaic, Galilean Aramaic, from my neck of the woods up in the north in Israel, definitely not from Judea, the south area of our lands where Jerusalem and the temple are found. So she's Jewish? Her deep, throaty voice drives a heat through me that has nothing to do with the rising sun. I quickly raise one knee to hide the tent my tunic is threatening to become, trying to nonchalantly place my hand in my lap. Usually a well-disciplined rabbi, I am both alarmed and captivated that a woman, who obviously has no regard for Yahweh's order of the day, or Greek or Roman law for that matter, could have this effect on me. This means she could only be one thing. The one thing rabbis are strictly forbidden to associate with, think about, and certainly not entertain any thoughts of. As if she can read my pesky thoughts, a smirk edges across her face, followed by a flash of knowing, eyebrows raising. Her eyes suggestively smile, ever so slightly dropping to my groin before once again meeting mine. Just then, the bushes rustle, drawing my attention. 3 hulking figures emerge from the shadows, their footsteps deliberately moving them to flank her sides, as if summoned by her presence. Clubs hang loosely in their hands, held with the casual confidence of men who rarely need to use them, yet also not afraid if given the command. Scarves obscure their faces, leaving only their eyes naked, hard, unblinking, and awaiting her direction. They move with purpose, nodding to her with their eyes, acknowledging her authority. My gaze finds its way back to her as I struggle once again to make sense of these occurrences. The flirtatious smirk that danced on her lips moments ago has vanished. In its place, the determination of her task at hand, robbing me blind. I am utterly and purely baffled. Here, on this road, is a woman, hair freely flowing, flanked by men she clearly charges to act on her behalf, wanting my coins, absolutely unafraid that I will overpower her and take her back to Jerusalem to stand trial in front of Pontius Pilate. I mean, how could I overpower her, that is, with these brutes by her sides? A deep breath finally enters my lungs. I move my lips, ready to attempt to speak. However, this only makes me cough all the more, which heightens the woman's impatience. Hand on her hip, she begins to tapping her foot, kicking what more dust, her face scowling. The foreboding men begin to beat their clubs against their hands. I get out between bouts of coughing. I draw a deep, steadying breath, forcing my mind to center. I remind myself of who I am, pushing away the image of the men with arms like tree trunks, and try again. This time, I summon my rabbi's tone, the one we're taught for solemn rituals, for the sacrifices, the same tone men use at home when their wives or daughters are the same tone men use at home when their wives or daughters dare to step out of line. My voice sharpens as I challenge her. Who are you, mere woman, to demand my coins? She stares down at me for a beat, her gaze carrying the weight of 100 rabbis. then another, and another, before throwing her head back and laughing. Piercing hyena-like cackle shatters the stillness. Her voice ricochets off the mountains, each echo louder than the last, as her throat bellows and cracks with bridled mirth at my feeble attempt to remind her of her place. Laughter consumes her, wild and unrelenting. Her body shakes, her eyes rolling back, her head tossing, possessed by the fury of her amusement. She doubles over, overcome by the force of it. A wild, feral beast unleashed. I feel anything but jovial at the sight of her. A chill snakes down my spine, only to ripple back up, setting my nerves ablaze. Goose flesh prickles along my arms, every hair standing on end. My heart races again as dawning starts to pierce through the haze of my fuzzy mind. She is not just a Jezebel. She is a Lilith. Adam's first wife, the wife that defied him, who refused to bow to Adam's rightful place as God's chosen sex, who rejected submission to men and Yahweh outright. Cast out into the wilderness along with her primal urges, she became a scourge to all of men, ravaging them over and over and over again, never satisfied, always seeking more, determined to ruin men for her gain. The original she-demon, the mother of countless legions of horrors, her spawn unleashed to ransack our tribes with an unquenchable thirst for chaos. Until now, I thought the whispers of Lilith were just that, whispers. Low voices stalking in the shadows, stories spun to help both men and women keep their bodies and will obedient to Yahweh's, to assist us in taming our unruly bodies with their unholy desires. Her cackling edges off, tapering into a low, rasping hum. The men shift, their massive frames begging to inch forward. She raises a hand, though, and they halt mid-step. My vision sharpens, eyes fully dilated now and the world snapping into focus. Ever so slowly, yet determinedly, I draw my feet beneath me, testing my strength. I am unsure if I can stand, but I am certain of this. Rabbi or not, I will not let myself be carried off by Lilith and her consorts without a fight. Not if there is still breath in these lungs. She chuckles softly to herself, shaking her head gently. The wild creature once again, a soft, subtle, alluring siren. Without warning, her eyes find mine and lock on, searing through me with the ferocity of a stake driven into a wood beam. Her words begin to fire like arrows, seeking their target, unrelenting and precise. You men of Israel, you think yourselves the pinnacle of piety. Holy and righteous are you, wrapped up in your self-importance like sheep's wool. You sit in the temple day and night, debating who Yahweh is, what he does for you, and how he justifies your place as his most holy and chosen servants. Meanwhile, the rest of us labor and toil, our fingers worn to the bone in your fields, tending your sheep and cattle, watching over your children, and ensuring your homes are just to your liking, going to an early grave from pure exhaustion. In return for our service to you, what do you demand? Tithe from us, as if all of our daily grinds is not enough. Even though we own nothing of which we work so tirelessly to keep alive and thriving if possible, not the fields, nor the homes, nor the sheep. You claim it is for Yahweh, these tithes, though these tithes never seem to leave the temple. And then you refuse us entrance into the temple our labor has built. You forbid us the joy of worship, to enjoy the fruits of our sweat, and perhaps dance and sing in worship of the sacred. Instead, you sit in your temple all fat and mighty, while women, children, and the elderly are starving, beaten, dying, forgotten. You all are nothing more than whitewashed tombs, all glimmering and glistening on the outside. But on the inside, you and your rabbis are devoid of any truth or depth, lacking any true substance of the divine Shekinah. I stand in their behalf, for the forgotten, for the beaten and broken, for the lowly, and on behalf of the goddess, for the great and mighty fair maiden whose heart yearns and burns for all her people, not just for you, the whitewashed tombs. The great and mighty fair maiden? I've heard that phrase before, but where? Before I can place the thought or fully comprehend the weight of her declarations, delivered with a conviction that would shame even the eldest rabbi, she continues, her voice unwavering. It is with her, the great and mighty fair maiden's authority, I demand your coins. We are merely taking from you what is rightfully ours, ensuring abundance for all, not just for the few whom choose themselves. She steps closer, her stance wide as if she holds the earth herself steady beneath her feet. From my lowly place on the ground, she towers over me, an imposing force, her chest rising and falling in rhythm with her fervor, her eyes growing wider by the pulse, still feral, wild, indomitable. Her words echo within me, a tempest battering the fortress of my understanding built by the last 10 years of deep studying with the rabbis of 3 different sects. They beg to question every lesson I have ever learned, each tenet I have clung to in rituals. Could it be true? Could this woman, this undomesticated and unkept creature, speak truth? Surely not. What am I thinking? Perhaps the blow to my head has transported me to some otherworldly realm. In the world I know, women are mere shadows of men, incomplete in their development, unfinished forms, sculpted from Autumn's rib to serve men, their desires for their husbands. They are ruled by emotion, incapable of true reason. How can anything sensible, no matter how it sounds, be trusted when it spills from such a flawed and inferior vessel? And yet, her utterances churn within me like a storm-tossed sea, each nonsensical notion clawing at my moorings, searching for a crack, a breach to exploit, seeking to splinter my defenses and drag me under. No, Yeshua, this is dangerous. My mind rails against the pull of her voice, whispering warnings of spells and seduction, of demons and snares. She is Lilith, the she-demon who deceives and devours, who drags men's souls to Gehenna, never to return to Yahweh's light. Yet my soul, it will not flee as I command of it. It deliberately disobeys like an unruly child. It stirs within me with a great vigor, overpowering my rationality, reaching toward her like a newborn toward the breast, desperate for nourishment after a long, dry sojourn in the wilderness. The wind begins to violently toss the trees and bushes around us, my hair lifting, dirt flying into my eyes. Just as quickly it settles, an eerie stillness seeps into my bones, thick and heavy, unrelenting, anchoring me to the earth, as though the weight of all the cosmos themselves had descended upon me. Is Yahweh himself? Is he confirming her words? A lightning bolt flashes before my eyes, a vision of all my silent and spoken judgments towards women passing before me, their hidden looks of sadness and dejection turning into fury, anger, disgust, clearly visible. Just as sudden, the vision is gone and I'm sitting in the dirt at the feet of this woman, completely and utterly dumbfounded, stunned into silence. A shudder runs down my spine as I feel myself tinkering on the precipice of something vast, terrifying and unknown, looking at this creature before me. She stares at me, unblinking, unyielding, a force of nature incarnate. My mind screams at me to run, to resist. What? Her voice, light, teasing, sprinkled with mirth. She lowers herself, bringing her eyes level with mine, daring me as she mockingly continues. Does the cat have your tongue, Rabbi? Before I can react, her eyes are drawing me in, pulling me downward into a free fall. The earth has vanished from beneath my feet. I fumble, reaching for something to steady myself, and yet a warmth of utter comfort envelops me, cradling me, seeping into every crack of my being. In her eyes, I glimpse an entire other world, one I know, but do not know how I know. This world, it is etched into my bones, woven into my very marrow. 10 years of Torah study, rigid rituals, sacrifices and prayers, all of it dissolves like dew under the morning sun. If I'm honest with myself, I'm not sure any of that has touched the depths of my being the way this woman has in mere moments. Is this possible? Or is this just Lilith and her spells? A small spark of an idea ignites within me when I find myself unable to control or squelch. I am destined for her world. With that, I'm yanked even deeper into the vision. I see laughter and bounty, a vision of dancing around an odd yet gloriously majestic tree. Under the light of the moon, I lose myself in the ecstasy of worship. Birth and death unfold in harmony beneath this tree under the moon. Women move freely, unbounded by convention, their hair hanging loosely as this woman's, their laughter filling me with glee. They glide and sway, their movements imbued with the same quiet authority that radiates from this strange woman before me. The men laugh with unrestrained joy, their voices booming and their shoulders shaking, the kind of laughter that fills the air and lifts your spirit. Their presence, protective yet reverent, as they join in the sacred celebration. Somehow, some way, just as her world is swirling and dancing around me, I am aware of her. Her gaze pierces the veil of my inner sanctum, softening as it deepens, searching me with curiosity. Then she blinks, snapping me back to the hard ground I sit on, my soul immediately crying out for her to return to me. I lurch forward as she leans back. An indiscernible smile breaks across her lips. When I finally find my mouth to speak, my voice is not my own. I notice it carries no authority, no certainty that I had just moments before. Only the wonder and awe of a child. Who are you? She responds without missing a beat, that slight smirky smile back in her voice. They call me Mary of Magdala, and let it be so. Please continue to join me back here, as I am sure I will continue to read you more excerpts as they come along. If you have any questions of how this novel is coming about, how I'm doing my research, I would be happy to explore those questions in other videos. Until then, so much love. Bye-bye.